that we're there. And the worst thing about Zoom, as I'm discovering, is that you talk to no one, and you just hope that someone's got a facial expression that makes like you're engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to put photos up again, that's fine. So thanks, David, first and foremost, for inviting me to have a chat to your team. Just so Anderson and Kevin's benefit, just give you an idea who I am and where I'm coming from, as opposed to where I'm from. I have a coaching business here in Canada, Action Coach, which is primarily focused on business coaching. However, I have a personal background that involves me becoming a trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, a certified NLP life coach, as well as a bunch of other trainings and esoteric stuff that I go into at different stages in conversations with different people. And my background in the UK, though, was helping people with insurance claims, but being their advocate to ensure that they got what they wanted, not what the insurance company wanted to impose upon them. And I had a particular methodology that encompassed all of my learnings, all of my teachings that I've had, including marketing and other business stuff, that helped me reverse engineer solutions for people. I don't adopt anything because someone's told me that's how it should be. And it gives me a way of, I won't say unique, because I don't think there is anything ever discovered. We're just building upon the shoulders of others. Any unique thought I have is at best is a synergy of other ideas that somebody else has put forward, and we're growing from them. If I do expand into something new, then this is trademarked and it's mine, and you've got to pay me extra dollars for this session. So that's the preamble. So feel free to fire away any questions as we go along. I asked David what he would like me to talk about, and he said the idea of habits. And I decided I'm going to spend a lot of time thinking about that, as well as doing a bit of research into habits. And the more I consider the situation and how to install a habit into people, there's so much fallacy and misinformation that's out there. The idea that a habit takes 21 days to instill into somebody is actually a load of rubbish. It's a nonsense. Mechanically, it doesn't work that way. The way the brain is created, it doesn't happen that way. Likewise, the idea of 10,000 hours to become a master of anything is also a fallacy that was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell, but the guy who came up with the concept, Anders, I can't think of his surname for the moment, he said it's this idea of deliberate practice. And for me, if you start breaking down the structure of what a habit really is, it's a conditional response to a given set of circumstances that we undertake habitually, if you pardon the extension of the use of the word. But the habit is in effect a shortcut so that you don't have to exert too much cognitive energy into doing that particular exercise. A good example will be is when we all wake up in the morning, we do whatever we do in whatever order we do, but one of those things that you're going to do without fail is going to be brushing your teeth. But you don't cognitively think about you're going to brush your teeth unless you've got one of those new fancy dancy electronic toothbrushes that tells you to do it for 2 minutes in different quarters of your mouth. But until you start doing it time and time again, that cognitive habit isn't formed. But what really is forming is new neural pathways within your brain, where the neurotransmitters are going through those pathways until a groove effectively is set, and that becomes the default position. So even if you've got this new fancy dancy toothbrush, you're in a situation whereby it becomes routine, which I think is a better way of creating a habit. So you don't have to think about it time and time again. And so it is when it comes to exercise, but other ways. So another way of thinking about this is that habit is an idea of an anchor and a trigger. And I don't know, are you all familiar with the idea of anchors?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So for the benefit of maybe the video, the recording of this, an anchor is a set of behaviors that are stimulated following a trigger. But an anchor can be a marketing messages, I'm loving it, whether it's McDonald's or something, or stepping over the line to creep into the gym that you've got to get on into the zone, even if you don't feel it, putting on an appropriate wear of dress or the right outfit, your favorite pair of sneakers, lacing up the left foot as opposed to the right foot, whatever that habit happens to be, but it sets the anchor and sets you into the right frame of mind so you can do what you want. The thing with triggers and anchors is they're actually really easy to set, but they're less easy to collapse. So I'm not going to spend too much time in talking about how to collapse an anchor, but I want to talk about how you can really set an anchor and how therefore it will be really important to create a set of circumstances for your clients for them to adopt the right behavior that you want to instill upon them given the right set of circumstances, because I think that's what you want. So for me, and all the teaching about triggers and anchors, if you go back to Pavlov's dog, you've probably all heard the story about Pavlov would work with the dog and he would ring a bell and would serve them food, and eventually he would take away the food and still ring the bell and the dogs would start salivating. That didn't take 21 steps, and it definitely didn't take 10,000 hours. But it was that linkage of the reward with an association to a particular set of circumstances. And the reason it works and anchoring works is the anchor is set at a point of elevated emotion. And that's the key thing. You have to get somebody into the most elevated state, positive or negative, to instill a new behavior that can be anchored to that state, or to an anchor to a place on their body, whether it's a knuckle by putting some pressure on and creating a neuro association between that elevated state and the physicality that can create a new anchor that can be triggered every time somebody presses that point. It's also why it's so dangerous when somebody's feeling down and what our human nature is to go and put an arm around them to give them a hug or tap them on the shoulder, say, there, everything's okay. What you're really doing is setting in place an anchor for that emotional negative state that they're feeling, so that every time someone's touched or embraced in that way, it reconnects or sets the trigger in place for that behavior to be in situ.
Right, that makes sense.
Right, so you have to be very, very careful when you're setting anchors. Now, in the context of getting your clients, though, to adopt new behavior, one of there's two thoughts on this, and they're both opposites, so they're not really that helpful in this sense. But it's the idea that if you're going to make change, you make radical change, and you don't do it in incremental steps. The challenge you have in the fitness world is that you're taking someone from a less than desired state and you want them to get to a desired state. So to bridge that gap, very often they have this image of how they want to be, but they don't necessarily believe that's where they're going to get to, because they know there's going to be a long, arduous task. So telling someone you've got to change your diet immediately, you're going to have to get up an hour earlier, you're going to have to put in this much more exercise, you're going to have to cut your drinking, you're going to have to do all this, creates a degree of resistance much, much earlier than it would be is if you're creating incremental steps, slow incremental steps, instilling new behaviors. And I think that it becomes less overwhelming for people by doing so. So if, as opposed to making 10 changes all at once, you bring in one and you keep reinforcing that with reward to the end. And the best exponent of that was Benjamin Franklin, of all people. He had a 13-week program that ran 4 times a year, time and time again. And he talked about in terms of qualities and behaviors that he wanted to adopt. And all he did was, over the 13 weeks, he made a commitment to do one of those new behaviors every day for that week. And he would record the success of doing that for every day he didn't. He didn't berate or chastise himself when it never worked, but he just recorded it. So at the end of 7 days, he could see he did it 5 or 7 days, and he would be happy. He would then move on to the second behavior, didn't worry about the first one anymore, but he kept doing this on a 13-week cycle. And what he did is, when he started to review things, he noticed that the behavior started becoming ingrained, and he was still actually doing all of those things. So it's a way, if you like, of chaining in new behaviors. And you need to have that feedback loop to notice, one, that it's working, and create great celebration against the working, but also to be gentle and kind to yourself to notice it's not working. Because you can't change the past behavior, but you can take that information as feedback that you need to change something again in the future. So if I went to Five Guys later, which I'm very tempted to do, and I know I shouldn't eat that bacon double cheeseburger or whatever they call the damn thing, right? But if I ate it, right, I can't change the fact I've eaten it. All I can do is be cognizant that I haven't stuck to my wellness regime and agree to change my behavior in the future. And
Right.
so it is, there's no point in berating if they've got something wrong. And all you're doing is, when you berate someone, is the irony is you're setting a new anchor. Because when I do something wrong, this is going to be the consequences of it, and I'm going to feel even shittier than I did before. Therefore, what's going to encourage me to change my behavior? Because I'm anchored into that shittiness. You
Right.
need to create the space for people to move on into. And there's a great technique about the feedback loop. Is when you, I'll give you the structure of it. The feedback loop is, when you do X, these are the consequences. Can you do something different? Because you can't change the past, you want somebody to move into the space where they change it. And that opens them up to link the behavior of the past to consequences, but gives them the freedom to move in. And in training, if somebody then turns around and says to me, hey, I would like to, yeah, that was bad, I shouldn't have eaten my Five Guys. And you say to me, great, when you eat that Five Guys, you put yourself back a week's in training, but that's okay. Can you do it differently? I can say, yeah, I can, I'll stay away from it. But what would you suggest to me, Anderson or Kevin or David? And you'll say, well, you know what, I would suggest that you have maybe grazing nuts in the car, or you drink more water. Hey, that's cool. And that's where those apps work, because those apps give that signal that you are getting rewards, because the reward is that high emotional. So that's where it all starts linking together. So that's what I wanted to share about the idea of my understanding as to how habits are formed. But it's really key that people recognize the negative habits, but it's that, how can I do it differently, rather than just, they need to be cognizant because they're not being aware of what they're doing. But you can create the space for them to put new habits in that they can stack over the old ones. But I would suggest only one or two. And I want to give you a couple of slides. Well, there's 5 slides, if that's okay with you. But
Yeah, of course.
before I do, is there anything that you want me to cover again, or just return to?
Sorry, my internet was cutting out a little bit when you were talking, like, initially about the anchors and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was kind of just dead noise for me. Can you just re-explain what those two things are again?
Right. Okay. So anchors and triggers. There is an argument that we are stimulus response mechanisms. When something happens, we respond to any given situation, and because of that situation, we then go ahead and create a behavior, or we undertake a behavior. So we could be cognizant of our current situation and make a choice, but in real terms, we get exhausted by having too many things to think about. So we have these systems in place that can create automated responses, so that we go and do something as a result of something happening without having to think too much about it. The neural pathways are being created in your brain, and the neurotransmitters don't have to create new pathways. That's why habits are so quickly, easily conformed. But that is the same structure of an anchor and a trigger, so that when a particular event happens, you are triggered to go and undertake a particular behavior. That's called anchoring, and it's really easy to set anchors even if you're not aware of it. A lot of advertising that takes place is an anchor. When you hear a song and you're in a particular elevated mood, it could be, that elevated mood could be an emotional high or an emotional low for that matter, and that song immediately transports you back to that feeling. That is an anchor that is triggered, ring that emotional response at the sound of that verbal anchor. You get it in TV advertising, radio advertising, when someone looks at you in a particular way. You know, it may not be that the same person who gave you that expression, but it sets the same stimulus response to you. And what I'm suggesting is that habits are in effect anchors that are that have been put in place that triggered automatic responses without you considering them. Because let's take an example. I don't think there is a person on this planet, except for maybe Mr. Philip Morris, who turns around and says that smoking is good for you. There is an argument that nicotine is a good stimulant, but smoking is pretty shit for the health, right? So it doesn't matter, right? People still smoke, even if they're aware that it's not bad. It's because that habit is formed, and the consequences of that habit for them are one thing, and therefore that they just carry on doing the habit because it brings them a degree of comfort, a degree of camaraderie, whatever the secondary benefits are. But the cost of stopping that habit is too great for them. So just trying to create, just being intellectual about it doesn't work. You have to do different things. And I'm just suggesting to you that you don't have to wait for 21. You have to get 21 days. You have to get that buy-in from somebody, but make it easy for them. Create them to grow into that space. Get them to recognize the reward and the benefit from doing what they're meant to be doing. And that will start in itself creating new anchors for somebody that will trigger a new response. Does that answer your question, Kevin?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Anybody else?
No, I like that. Would another anchor be like I was at my friend's house that has kids, and they're trying to get them to do nice things like clean their bedroom or brush their teeth, wash their hands. And every time the parents notice, they put like a bead in a jar without the kids. If the kid asks, they won't put the bead in, but if the parent notices, they'll put that in there, trying to anchor, hey, I get recognition positively when I do this. And those beads eventually add up $2 that they can eventually spend on an item.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, I'm not questioning the your friend's parenting, because you know what, I had gold stars on my wall, or well, occasionally I got a gold star. But what you must be careful of is that any behavior that you instill in anybody is sustainable, and that they don't create the meaning attached to the reward, but rather the meaning attached to the change of the behavior. So if a child only, in that example, if a child only now does something because they get the bead, right, it's not instilling the right form of behavior. Yeah. So there has to be, you have to shake it up a little, right? But you want to always do it at that elevated bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and just as I go off on 1,000 tangents, but a really good example is for if you've got a kid who is walking across the floor, right, and you tell them to be careful, don't slip or don't run, then all of a sudden it sets into a place where when I do this, this has a particular meaning. Or if you're chastising someone, you're a naughty boy. Well, no, you're not. You're a child that's exhibited a naughty behavior by judgment elsewhere, but you're now creating, with the use of your language, a new anchor that certain things means certain, create certain results. And actually that's the structure of a lot of phobia as well. You know,
Right.
it's
Okay.
setting an extreme response, an extreme meaning to a particular set of events. And actually it's a pretty good place for me to bring this slideshow in so you can see it. Microsoft PowerPoint. I don't know how this is showing up. So have you got the whole screen or just part? It doesn't really matter.
I can see like the power or a point of power.
Cool.
And the whole screen, the slides on the bottom too.
Oh, okay. Then it's the other one. Okay, it doesn't matter. I've got nothing to hide. So this is, if you think about this, you just want to be aware of where your client's language is. So the point of power is we talk about in terms of whether someone's powerful or whether they're powerless. And we say that if someone is powerless, they're still in bed. Their language is all about blame, excuses, and denial. They make all these reasons for things happening to them or reasons not to do something. They're not actually have any ownership or personal responsibility or accountability to what they're doing. And that is a series of behaviors that are learned behavior that is they need to shake. And you as coaches need to be holding the oar, if you like, for them every time they exhibit something that is a blame, excuse, or denial. And so I would just encourage you that if someone's language and their behavior are mismatched, it's invariably because they're still in bed. If their language, right, is mismatched, they are trying to force their way out without getting the, they're not really believing what they're doing. They're doing something because of somebody else's encouragement rather than it's something that they want to do. So just be alert to the language someone's using, and then you have to demonstrate behavioral flexibility to find a different way of encouraging them to do something. So any action they're doing is they're accountable for, they have the personal responsibility, the ability to respond appropriately in any given situation, and have the ownership of the outcome of what they're doing. It's not vested because of you, because you really want to empower people to do so.
Right, that makes sense.
Plus, if they are doing something, yet they're saying, oh, God, this is difficult, I'm doing this despite of, you need to be creating associations with the behavior that is actually, hey, you did this really well. And so that they are linking their behavior now and they start shifting their language. That makes sense? Cool.
Yeah, so in that, if we role play really quickly, if I'm the client and you were the trainer and I said something like, or you told me, for this week, try to eat as clean as possible.
Right.
And
I would stop you there. Let me stop you there. You just said, okay. I want you to try to eat, right? Drop the word try,
okay.
Right? Because try implies failure. It doesn't,
okay.
Right? You've got your mobile phone in front of you, haven't you, David? No, in fact, you've got a bottle in front of you. I remember, I just saw you drink it. Do me a favor, try and pick up that bottle.
Yeah.
No, go and try.
Yeah.
Right? You see, trying means you ain't going to do it.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Right? So your language has to be cleaner for the benefit of your clients too, because you're giving them direction. I removed this slide because the slides are crappy slides, but I just want you just to imagine for a moment a blue tree.
Okay.
Right? Now don't think of a blue tree. Right? So for you not to think of the blue tree, you had to cognitively create a blue tree in your mind to then erase that thought of a blue tree. Right. So if you tell someone, try to do something, you're setting them up ultimately that this is a bit beyond them. As Yoda says, there's no try, only do. Right?
I like that.
You need to be that Yoda for your client.
Okay, I like that.
Because you don't set them up for the excuses either.
Right. Okay, so eliminate the word try.
Yeah. So go back to your question.
All right. So you're the trainer. You tell me this week, David, you're not going to drink any alcohol.
No, 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 no. Don't start with the negative. Don't think of a blue tree, right? You just told me not to drink alcohol, so I had to think of the beer that I wasn't allowed to have anymore.
Okay.
So what I want you to do is I want you to drink 2 liters of water during the day. Okay, don't want you to do it all in one go. But what I'd like you to do is just have 5 glasses of whatever it is for 400 ml, and just record them. Boom.
Okay.
And if you get to 7 o'clock at night, so don't want you really drinking at 7 o'clock at night, that you've only done 4, that's okay too. But let's set this as a goal that you're going to drink your 2 liters of water.
Okay.
And let's record that, and that's going to be the goal for this week.
I like that.
Do you think you could do that?
Yeah, that'd be very easy.
Cool. So why don't you text me at the end of the day just to confirm how much you've done?
I like that. Okay. I like that example in that scenario.
Cool. But that's where language is very, very difficult. You know?
Right.
Yeah. And we could all be better at it.
All right. And then you also ask them to follow up with you, which is really good, because what they would do is then probably own up and be like, hey, I didn't have that water. And they're acknowledging it, right? So they're accountable for that action and responsible. And you would just say, okay, that tomorrow, or great try, or no, you wouldn't say great try. You'd say, great, tomorrow, same thing, record it, and then get back to me at the end of the day.
And that's great. You know, you did 4. That's phenomenal. You know, before today, you weren't doing that. So that's phenomenal. And what you're doing is cleansing your body and you're removing some of those toxins. So great job. Do you think you can do more of that? Hey, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to saying, shit, you've only done 4 glasses. You know, if you don't do 6 glasses, that's going to have this impact. You're going to become more constipated or whatever it happens to be. You're not going to have the movement. So tomorrow, will you do 5 or 6? You know, it's a lot more onerous, but
Right.
It doesn't encourage you to become personally responsible for the change, because you don't want someone linked to you to make that change.
I have a good one on top of this then. Say now I don't reply to you at the end of the day. Tomorrow you follow up, just checking up, see how you're doing. I missed your text last night. I had a very busy day and I didn't have time to drink the water at all.
Okay, that's okay, and that's really great for you to acknowledge that. I, as your coach, am committed to holding you to account, because we did discuss that at day 1, right? To help you realize your goals. So I want to support you. So what was the challenge yesterday that made it difficult for you not to drink the water? Okay.
I just had many meetings, yeah.
Well, isn't that interesting? Okay. So do you think you can do it differently tomorrow?
I will try.
Okay, I appreciate you trying. So can we at least have an agreement today that you're going to try, using your language now, to at least have 1 glass of water today? Do you think you can do that?
Yes.
So that's all I'm going to ask you to do. I want to build in your success. So come back to me once you've had that glass, so I can celebrate that success with you.
Okay, I like that. That's really good.
Cool. Cool. So I'll show you the next slide. This is what empowerment is for me. This is an old slide, so you can see it's quite dated in terms of its setup, so please excuse. So a lot of people are either on the C, which stands for cause, or E, which is the effects side. So if you take the point of power, the result side of the equation is the or, ownership, accountability, and responsibility. Reasons is being in bed, and blame, excuses is denial. So when people are when they're in reasons things, I am fat because, or I didn't do my exercise because, right? I actually have given up any personal choice and responsibility on how to make a change in my behavior. And in fact, the dangerous thing is I'm saying to you as my coach, look, fix me. And the problem is, if they don't get the results because they're not taking ownership, what really happens is that they're going to start linking you to their failure. And how does that work when it comes to promoting you and the word of mouth and to make your 3 or 4 or 5 years running top trainers here in Vancouver? Yeah, you only want to link success, which is the results that they set out to achieve, in their mind, so they become your greatest advocate. So you want to shift people's language to the result side of the equation. And what that really means is I am who I am because of the steps that I took. It's not I have this result because of all these other external events. There's a big difference there. That's why the point of power and empowerment is you want to move people from the effect side of the equation back to the results, so they're in charge, because that's true empowerment. Yeah? I see you leaning forward, David, so yeah, it's whether you're going to ask me a question.
No, I'm just unmuting so I can.
Cool. So I'm going to show you, I think I've got 2 versions of the same slide. You just want to ensure that your clients take ownership and they're on the result side. Where they are is a direct result of all their actions in the past. And to explain that further, I'm going to just quickly talk about what we call the NLP Communication Model. Events happen to people. You imagine this lovely shaded figure is yourself. Your experience of the world, of what's going on outside of you, all those events come into you through your senses. And those senses are your visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory senses. You're all familiar with those terms? Yeah, cool. Yeah. Interesting thing, the olfactory one, which is through your nose, smell, it's the only one that doesn't go through any sense of filtering. If you smell something, it immediately takes you back to that place where you first smelt it. It's why when you move into supermarkets, the smell of bread is often put forward. It's why the smell of coffee is so powerful for a lot of people, and they say for you to put that into houses if you're trying to sell them. So just throw that out there. The problem is you are bombarded at any one time with 2 million bits of information every second. But because of there's so much information hitting you at any time, your brain has to delete a huge chunk of that, or it has to create distortion as to what's going on, or create generalization. Because without it, your brain couldn't cope with the sheer bombardment of information that's happening at any one time. And so what it does is it then creates those external events. Once it's gone through your deletion, distortion, and generalization, it creates an internal representation in your mind of what's going on outside of you, which is why you could be going, say, hey, honey, where's the salt? And you can open up the cupboard and you'll look around. You can't see it because you have deleted already. I don't know where the salt is, but your wife says it's in the top cupboard in the right-hand side, and she brings that to your attention and you can finally see it because you've had to delete all that other information. But your brain creates that internal representation by getting rid of those 2 million bits of information and breaks it down to only 134 bits. So there's a massive amount of information that you aren't seeing. And there's new studies that says that the eye, for example, you only really see about 20% of what's going on around you. The brain fills in all the blanks for you because you were overwhelmed with all that information. And it takes that 134 bits and it breaks it into 7 plus or minus 2 chunks. So 5 to 9 chunks of information at any one time could you ever be cognizant of in terms of an internal representation. It's also why if you've got in the car and you're driving somewhere, you wake up and you realize you're heading the direction you never thought about because of that habit of what you were doing, and you just go ahead on that behavior. We've all done it. So how does it create this deletion, distortion, and generalization? Oh, sorry, the order of this slide is slightly different. So once you've got this internal representation, that affects your state, how you're feeling, your emotional sense of who you are, good, bad, or indifferent, without passing judgment on it. And that then in turn affects your physiology. It is also why you can adjust your physiology that will impact your state and then change what you're focusing on. You've got the expression beer goggles. You know, you have too many beers, you know, your internal representation of the person in front of you has changed very dramatically, because they're all linked together and their chains go back and forth, and they start creating your new behavior. Yeah. So the question then becomes is, what do you delete, distort, and generalize? And this next slide talks about it here, in that you do it by the instructions you've given your brain, as well as those instructions that have been given to you by the environment, by peers, by family, whether or not someone's told you to put beads in the jar to reward success, whether or not you jump on the scales and the scales are going the wrong way, and therefore you create that loop. I'm feeling down, or the only thing that makes me feel happier is to stuff myself on that Five Guys burger that I keep referencing. But we've all been there, so we all know what we're talking about. So this slide here is just a very quick example of that external event here. The deletes and distorts by your referencing of how you understand time and space, matter, energy, language, your memories, decisions, something called meta programs, which are binary systems that go on into place, your values and beliefs. All men are bastards. Guess what? Every man you meet is going to be a bastard from this moment on. Your attitudes to various things, the language, when you talk about trying, when you talk about doing something in the negative for it then to become positive, definitely impacts your internal state and your internal representation, which then changes your behavior. And what you are talking about here as coaches is, how can you adapt someone's behavior from which is familiar, so that they can do something that's going to be supportive of their expressed goal? And where can you impact them? Practically only in that hour you're working with them in the gym, plus a feedback loop and the language that you communicate with them. And you have to link, which is where the anchoring comes in, and the triggers, that the good behavior that you want to instill, the trigger, anchors them into a new behavior. That's right. So if you're feeling down, the better way is to shift your physiology. Walk smarter, walk with your head in the air, lift your head up a little, you know, rather than going and have that Five Guys or that bar of chocolate, right? You know, or, you know, it shows up in so many different ways. I'm feeling low energy. Damn it, I've got to go and have another cup of coffee. Or I could just go for a walk and do something differently. Or it's the same thing that's happening. It's the choice that we make. You need to make that intervention so that people are aware of it, but you reinforce the new behavior. And so this just illustrates it. 2,000 bits coming in creates your experience of the world. You know, by the way, there is another thing here. This says AD stands for auditory digital. That just means it's the internal dialogue we're having. So when I said don't think of a blue tree, internally you have to process that, but that's your internal dialogue too. So that's the end of the slideshow, so I'll get rid of that. Anything else that you want to run through or you want me to return to?
I'm good right now, but that was amazing. Addison and Kevin, do you have anything that you would like to go back over or ask a question?
No, I think that all made a lot of sense to me. It's fantastic to hear.
That was good.
Well, then I've done my job. Thank you.
I really like that, and I like the role playing as well, because even just listening and taking that in and then role playing, it's still it's very helpful. I learned.
Thank you. Well, you know, if you think about the behavior, how do you and the neurology of your brain, it is you're creating these neuro pathways. So how do you instill a neuro pathway? But by repetition and by doing. And right. You have to practice it. There's one technique I was taught by these management gurus a number of years ago. If you want to instill a new behavior. What I used to do is put 5 coins in one pocket, and every time I did the new behavior, I shifted one of the coins into my other pocket. And that sounds really easy, but I can tell you at the end of the first month, the most I was able to do was shift 3 coins from one pocket.
I like that.
Because we forget.
Yeah.
It's also why the elastic band around the wrist, you know, if you're doing something that you want to shift, the little ting, right, which is unpleasant, creates the change. But to illustrate how quickly it is to create a new behavior and that stimulus response, my iPhone's here, and I've had a number of bleeps that show up, and I've got the red dots. Now, those red dots for me say that I have to go and deal with that. And until I deal with it, I've got anxiety. But that's an association that I've created. Well, those red dots create this negativity space. The relief comes by taking action.
Right.
So it doesn't always serve. You just got to be alert to it. And being alert to it gives you the opportunity to change your behavior. Otherwise, go back to bed. You're in denial. You're denying the facts of what's going on. I want to be in a different place to where I stand today. Great. Who is in charge of that? Who is going to make the change? I have to make the change, right? I can get support along the way, whether it's a physical trainer, whether it's a business coach or a nutritionist. But everything is to support me to where I want to get to, not to reinforce where I already am. And so you have to empower people so that they're at that place of choice.
I love that.
Cool.
So Joel, I'll be uploading this to our community page if you're okay with that.
For sure.
So anybody that's watching or listening, how can they find you and get in contact with you to see if you would be the right fit to coach them?
Sure. Thank you for that. The smartest way to reach out to me now is through the website, which is joelzimelstern.com. So it's JOELZIMELSTERN.com. I have to think about that. Isn't that amazing? And I've had so many years of practice.
Right. It's kind of like your own phone number. When somebody asks you your own phone number, you're like, I had it for 10 years. You're like, what is it?
Okay, here, actually, let me give you that as a really quick example, going back to the power of chunking. Give me your phone number, David.
Okay, 778-887-0660.
Great, okay. You just broke that down into 3 chunks. You didn't read out 778, da, 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 da. You went 778, da, 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 and then the next one, because your brain can't, it knows it, but it has to access it. But it's because it's processed and stored that information in a particular way.
Yeah, that's actually really true. Because again, memorizing your own credit card number, when you memorize it in the chunks that it gives you at, bases it that way so you can have a chance to memorize it. I don't know.
Yeah, you've just got to give me your last 3 digits on the other side. Brilliant.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right.
I'll stop the recording.